Hi, whoops. This feels dangerous because I'm sitting on my couch surrounded by little piles of my unread books, and I just sat down on the couch. Because the couch is not stable, I feel like every time I move, the piles move as well. Let's see if I can survive until the end of the video without any of the books ending up on the ground. Wish me luck. Hi, my name is Andi. I'm a chaotic reader, and I feel like for the past 2 years or so, certainly ever since I had this channel, I had terrible reading slumps during the summer, but whenever autumn came, I got so excited to read again. And this happened now too. I believe I finished 2 books over the last 3 months, but now that it's September, I cannot wait to put together my autumn TBR. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I gathered all of my unread physical books around me in little piles that you might have seen the footage of. Plus, I also have my ebooks to choose from, which are just on my Kindle. But it's not gonna be just me randomly picking up some books, but I put together, and this is why I have my laptop here, I put together a curated prompt list to help me select the right books. These are gonna be mostly genre or category prompts and full of things that I basically currently crave to read about. Starting strong with a classic that I have read before, and I have been talking about it in a few videos, but this time I really want to reread a classic that I enjoyed back in my high school days. Actually, there are not a lot of options for that I have currently in physical form in English with me. I am a bit sad that the picture of Dorian Gray cannot qualify for this prompt, because I actually never read it back in high school. I only just learned about it in literature class. So the picture of Dorian Gray is out, but I have 2 books that qualify, and I just realized that I left the other one on the shelf, so hold on, let me grab it real quick. Yes, so the 2 books are Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte and Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. Now, actually, they were both books I enjoyed back in high school, and both for different reasons. If I recall, and at this point I have to say, I graduated high school 10 years ago, so it was a long time ago. I enjoyed The Master and Margarita for its dark satirical elements. I believe there's also a talking cat. It's sort of magical realism where the plot takes place in basically 2 timelines, modern day and back in the past, and it also contains religious themes, which I'm not sure that I am quite in the mood for right now to read about, but it was a book that I enjoyed and also enjoyed analyzing back in the days in high school. But the one that I'm really itching to reread, because it was really one of my favorites. Master and Margarita was not really one of my favorites, it's just one I enjoyed. But a favorite of mine was Wuthering Heights. And I'm especially curious to read it because, as you might know, I'm Hungarian. So back in the days I read it in Hungarian, and I have never read the original. So that's why I'm actually curious if I kind of hold a different experience of what the story is or how the story unfolds just because I read it in translation, as opposed to reading now the original in English. If I said that The Master and Margarita is dark satirical comedy with religious themes, I would say Wuthering Heights is a lot more about a dark, obsessive relationship. I wouldn't say necessarily love story, but yeah, maybe a dark, obsessive love story, and how it changes the main characters' lives and the people around them and the generation after them, if I can say that. So for the classic reread, I would go for Wuthering Heights. Let me put it here so I can start growing the pile behind me. Next on the prompt list is a book with an academical setting, library, and or secret society. And the reason I added this to the list because, as I said before, I graduated high school 10 years ago. I finished my master's 5 years ago now. So it's been a while since I have been in academia. And I feel like especially the beginning of September, which was usually the start of the school year for us, brings me a kind of nostalgia about learning and studying and being in an academic environment. So I would like to read about that. Actually, I don't really have a lot of books left that qualify for that. I just finished Babel. I also read Blood over Bright Haven, which could have loosely qualified for this, which was an amazing 5-star read. I will talk a little bit about it later. Actually, I'm thinking if The Will of the Many would qualify from the secret society point of view, but I'm a little bit intimidated by it, to be honest. It's very chunky. I actually started to read it and I think I have gotten to 30 pages or so, and this is definitely a book where I would need, like, this is high fantasy, so I would need to take my time and read it in a way that I really understand the network of like political intricacies, word building, personal motivations, etc. And I don't feel like I'm quite ready for that this autumn, so I wouldn't go with The Will of the Many. But I still want to read it one day. Then, was there, I'm not sure if there is, was it The Starless Sea which had the secret library? I believe so, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, this seems like, based on the blurb, could fit sort of with the library, sort of with the secret society thing, but I had it in my shelf for a while and I haven't really reached for it, and I feel like I'm kind of keeping it as like a bottle of wine that I'm waiting for the right moment to crack it open, and I'm not sure it is now, or if it's gonna be now, I feel like it's gonna be more spontaneous. I don't want to put the pressure of like, yeah, I want to put this on a reading list and therefore I must read it, you know what I mean? Please tell me I'm not the only one who does it, because if I'm the only one, I kind of sound a little bit crazy right now. But what I'm thinking, actually, what could qualify really well? And it's also a funny one because I had it for a while now, is, oopsie, and I almost toppled one of the piles, is The Atlas Paradox. I read The Atlas 6 back in 2021, it must have been 2021, I believe, and I sort of liked it for what it was. And I bought the sequel, I think almost immediately, and just kind of forgot about it. So it has been sitting on my shelf, unread, for a while now, and I feel like if I don't force myself to read it, I will never read this book. So first of all, I have to refresh my memory on what happened on the first one, but I remember that I enjoyed the Atlas 6 for all of the mind games that the characters were playing, how pretentious and arrogant they were because of their own perceived importance. And that was somehow a good time to read about characters like this and their schemes and their machinations against each other and their personal relationships, which were again rather complex. So I actually would like to continue reading about that. So then for the academic setting, library and or secret society, I believe the Atlas 6, or the Atlas Paradox, sorry, qualifies for all three of them. So this is gonna be the second book on my TBR. For the third prompt, I went with a book with cowboy romance. Now, it's simply because, as probably also many of you, I have seen the way that these cowboy romance books picked up popularity all over like BookTube, BookTok, Book social media. And I feel like it's especially intriguing to me because I'm not American, because I live in Austria. So the whole world of cowboys seems very far away from me. And I'm just really intrigued how you place a romance around that, or like if there are any way to like subvert the usual tropes and play around with them and make it something meaningful, you know? But I don't have any cowboy books in physical forms. I have a couple ebooks though. So I have Cash, I have Lost and Lassoed, which I believe those were the two that popped up on my like social media feeds most often, and therefore that's why I got them. I would actually go for Lost and Lassoed simply because I really like the art style of the cover, this sort of like comic-like illustration. So, and I think this is also part of a series which is rather well regarded among the people who enjoy this subgenre, I would say. So yeah, I would go for Lost and Lassoed, and I'm really curious to see what cowboy romance has to offer in terms of character tropes, storytelling, showing a non-American what the cowboy life is all about. For the next one, I admit I cheated a bit because I wrote this list like 2 weeks ago or so by now, and I put it on the list that I want to read a cozy murder mystery book, and I immediately started reading The Thursday Murder Club together with my husband. So it still qualifies for my TBR list because I'm only like 138 pages in. But yeah, I don't have any other cozy murder mystery actually, either in physical copy or in ebook form. So I wanna go for The Thursday Murder Club. What I like about it so far is really the storytelling voices, like you get multiple POVs, and I feel like the author really mastered the way old people think or speak. Like there are a lot of little quips about like how old people need to go to the toilet all the time, or like when they bake something and they just really just like in a normal conversation fishing for a compliment about the lemon drizzle cake that they baked. And I feel like that gives it such a unique tone of voice to the otherwise unfolding murder mystery that almost feels like it's kind of just like a background plot. And what's more interesting is all of these elderly people in the retirement village and their daily lives. So The Thursday Murder Club goes to the pile. The fifth prompt on the list is a gothic fantasy where the house itself feels alive. And the reason I put it on this list, because I really wanna read a book that's similar to, now I'm of course forgetting the title, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshane Chokshi. So this book was more about the obsessive relationship between two childhood friends, but it also had this, I think they called it like House of Dreams or something like this. This mansion, this gothic mansion, where the secrets got revealed. So I'm really searching for something similar to that. And looking at all the books, I am kind of realizing that I don't have a lot of like haunted houses or even gothic fantasy. I wouldn't say I have a lot, which is strange. But I guess that kind of leaves me with a very obvious choice, because that's the only one among my unread books, and it is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Now, I actually have high hopes for this book because I read The Sixth Death of the Saint from the author and also The 10,000 Doors of January, and both of them featured a world building that was so trippy. I remember specifically from The 10,000 Doors of January. How to explain this? It was not fully fleshed out, and therefore the whole world gave the illusion that it's like endless. It was more magical realism than fantasy, I would say, but it really gave the illusion that like anything can happen in the world, and it could have been easily explained. I'm not explaining this really well, but if you read The 10,000 Doors of January, let me know if you thought the same. But The Starling House is really the gothic fantasy with a, I wouldn't say haunted house, but it's a house full of secrets. So I'm hoping that it delivers a very similar vibe to The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, at least when it comes to the mansion full of secrets. And also I cannot ignore that the cover is absolutely gorgeous. So The Starling House goes to my autumn TBR. Next on the list is a predicted 5-star read, which I desperately need because now it is September. I read, I think, like 20 books or so far this year, and I only had one single 5-star, which was Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. So I need to read a book that gives me that 5-star experience. Because I loved Blood Over Brighthaven so much, I actually also got the author's previous book, which I believe is called The Sword of Kaigan. Let me search for it. Yes, The Sword of Kaigan. So that is a strong contender because the fact that I really enjoyed Blood Over Brighthaven for its complex plotline, how the characters were fleshed out, and still very flawed to their core, but not unlikable to the degree that they were annoying, if you know what I mean. I have high hopes for The Sword of Kaigan. Also because I heard somebody describe it, that it kind of reminded them of the Avatar: The Last Airbender, which was a favorite series when I was younger, because of the elemental magic system, I believe. And honestly, the cover is really cool. So if you're talking covers, The Sword of Kaigan also hooks me in because it exactly looks like I'm gonna read an epic tale of like fighting, power dynamics, you know, making your own way in the world. And that really makes me excited. Now, the other thing is, I also have another 5-star prediction, which I have been keeping for exactly days like this, maybe, when I feel like, okay, nothing is really hitting what I'm reading. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to love A Fire Endless from Rebecca Ross. Simply because I read A River Enchanted, it's actually like above me on that bookshelf, and I really, really liked it. The magic system can actually be a little bit compared if The Sword of Kaigan has the elemental magic system that I believe it has, because A Fire Endless also has elemental magic included in the plotline, but we are at a Scottish island where there are warring tribes and we follow a tribe leader woman and a bard. That sounded really wrong, but it's more exciting than what I'm telling you. So I really enjoyed A River Enchanted because it was a lot about inner struggles, especially I think her struggles as a woman taking a leadership position. And the love story still made sense in a way that they found understanding each other. And I say it all the time, but I feel like Rebecca Ross's biggest strength when writing romance or a love story is that the people falling in love make sense simply because they often struggle with very similar things at the core of it, maybe in a different way, but very similar things, and therefore they find understanding each other. And I find that beautiful. So should I go with A Fire Endless or should I go with The Sword of Kaigan? It's hard because The Sword of Kaigan is a standalone and The Fire Endless is a sequel, I mean the second part of a duology. So actually both of them would be really nice to read because they are relatively low commitment, like I don't need to read the next part of either of them. And I feel like with Rebecca Ross coming out with a new book, I believe titled Wild Reverence, I should really finish this before I get to that one. So I'm so sorry to The Sword of Kaigan. It remains on my TBR in the broader terms, but for my autumn TBR, also because it looks rather autumny. Maybe it's because of the red color or because of the flowers, but I will go with a Fire Endless from Rebecca Ross. For the next one, I want to add a book to my autumn TBR that has been on my bookshelf for more than 2 years. That's a little bit embarrassing. I have a couple of those, unfortunately, but I don't really know, like, that's the thing, like, there is a reason I haven't really reached for them, even though all of them, in theory, I think it's definitely a story that I would enjoy. Starting with, I think I actually read no, I haven't. I thought I read like 10 pages of this, but I also had a copy of The Poppy War for a while now, and I feel like this is also one of the books, similar to The Will of the Many, that I feel intimidated about to start. I recently finished Babel from R.F. Kuang. I also read Yellowface from her, and I also have my eyes on Catabasis. And I really feel like The Poppy War would be a story that I would really enjoy. Also from the setting perspective, like, is it kind of like historical China just reimagined? I would love to read about the story, especially as I know that it also has a big emotional impact. Besides all the complexities, vying for power, etc. So I don't know. Let's look through the other ones, and maybe The Poppy War will be the winner for this category. Then something else which I honestly don't think it's again the right time, although eventually I do want to finish it, is Unravel the Dusk, which is the second part of Spin the Dawn, which again, I read it I think back in 2020, 2021, and I immediately got the second part and then sort of forget about it. It is also Asian mythology inspired, and I believe it follows a seamstress, from what I can remember, who had to complete all of these trials. Basically the first book ended with her trials not being complete, so then that's why you have the second book where she has to make 3 magical gowns as her last trial. And I feel like it was a rather easy and quick read. It was not very memorable in terms of characters, if I have to be honest. I do remember the Raven, which is again prominently featured here, but I don't feel like it's time for me to finish this duology. So even though this book has been on my shelf for 2 years now, it goes back on the shelf, I'm sorry. Then something else, I don't think this has been on my shelf for 2 years though. Maybe maybe 2 years? I don't know. But we also have To Kill a Kingdom, which is a standalone, kind of dark fairy tale-esque, with a siren and a captain to the siren hunters. So it's very much enemies to lovers and all of that dark fantasy stuff, which I do enjoy a lot. And it also seems like, because it's a standalone, it should read fairly quickly. And I mean, I just looked through, it's 300 something pages, and the font is quite big, so it should also be like a quick and easy read. And I'm actually really curious how they managed to make it, because I don't know why, but when I think about sirens, I just think about kind of like a Little Mermaid retelling. And I am really curious how they managed to make it dark, but somehow not ridiculous. And I mean, the siren and siren hunter dynamic also seems very interesting to explore in terms of how they both grapple with accepting what the other person is and what kind of role they play in each other's lives. So I might actually get to Kill a Kingdom, maybe outside of my TBR as a true chaotic reader, but maybe not on my TBR right now. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm just putting this TBR together based on feelings, but then again, that's what the mood reader does. So far, maybe it's really gonna be the Poppy War. Let me look what else I have here. I also had the binding for more than 2 years, and I started to read it. Like, I even had like one quote marked at like page 11. So I started it, and somehow it didn't really draw me in, and therefore I had no motivation to continue it. But maybe this time it's really gonna be the moment where I finally pick it up and power through, especially since it looks exceptionally autumnal, with like the golden leaves, the deep blue of the cover, even the key, which I feel like looks really cool. Kind of screams autumn reading, autumn fantasy reading to me. This, I don't know if this could have qualified for the library prompt, but certainly we have a binder's apprentice as our main character. And from what I remember in this book, in this world, books are forbidden because they contain memories. And his work is very much connected to working on these memories and binding these memories. And that's gonna be dangerous. And I believe the plot kicks off as this binder's apprentice discovers his own name in one of the books, and he unlocks memories that he didn't know about. This is not a spoiler, this literally says on the blurb. So I really want to put the binding on my TBR list actually, because that sounds interesting, kinda goes with the gothic theme as well, and it feels like the right time for it. Alright, I'm doing it. So then for the book that has been on my bookshelf for more than 2 years, I chose the binding. Okay, we are almost at the end because I only wanted to put 10 books on my autumn TBR as a very realistic goal for a slow reader. So at number 8 we have a book with orange, red or brown cover because I thought like that screams autumn. I actually have a couple for these. Technically, Unravel the Dusk would qualify, but I already kind of discarded that idea. Something that I recently got, and I talked about it in a previous video, would be The Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, which, the fact that it takes place in Prague, it's also again one of those where the storytelling very much pulls you along in an adventure when you're kind of confused about what's happening and what's real and what's not. And that's also something I really enjoy in my fantasy books. So this could be a good candidate. Then we also have The Full Moon Coffee Shop, which I got from my husband as a gift, and it is Japanese magical realism featuring a coffee shop that it's run by talking cats. Actually, this could be a really nice addition because if I look at the current pile, I mean, I have a classic in there, a cozy murder mystery, but a lot of them are fantasy, which very much matches my taste. I mostly read fantasy. And then maybe The Full Moon Coffee Shop could be a little bit something different, more towards magical realism and the sort of Japanese storytelling that I enjoy, that's usually a lot slower and a lot more introspective. Okay, The Full Moon Coffee Shop, strong contender. Do I have anything else with red on the cover? Hold on. I mean, I had Good Omens for, again, a long while now. I actually got to like 185 pages. Only the font is red, so I wouldn't qualify that for this one. Then, actually I also have, this is also a book that I had for a while now, and there is a reason why I haven't reached for it, simply because it's a first in a series, and I didn't feel like I was ready to commit to reading the full series. But I also have the physical copy of A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I read, finally this year, The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue from the author, and I also read Vicious from her. That was like 2 years ago. I actually never got to read Vengeful, which is the second part of Vicious, even though I enjoyed Vicious. That's just me and not finishing series that I started. So yeah, I feel like a darker shade of magic with its alternative London. I'm kind of thinking like maybe some steampunkish world building. Maybe I'm completely off, but it really interests me. Again, I feel like the setting is interesting, but it somehow hasn't really drawn me in completely to make me want to pick it up right now. Yeah, I don't think I will get to a darker shade of magic right now. Maybe in the winter. Maybe it's gonna be a good winter read. Okay, I think this is all for the red or orange. I actually don't have brown cover books. I actually don't. Now that I'm looking around, I haven't missed any books. I have like bookshelves scattered around the living room. I haven't missed anything, so that means... Should I go with the Full Moon Coffee Shop? Should I go with the Daughter of Smoke and Bone? I feel like just to introduce a bit of variety into my reading list, and maybe if I'm gonna get fantasy fatigue eventually, which I usually do after too many fantasy books after each other, especially if they are very similar in terms of pacing, magic system, storytelling, etc. Then for this prompt, I will have the Full Moon Coffee Shop added to the list. Next on the list, I'm craving to read a book that's inspired by folklore or fairy tales. I should have some books that match this. Actually, I haven't really checked on my ebooks and I don't know them by heart. The Thief of Spring, which could qualify for that. I mean, it is a Persephone and Hades retelling, I believe, somehow mixed with like fae fantasy. And I read another book from this author, which I kind of forget the title about, but I will put it like up here, which I really enjoyed because she used the usual cliches that was in fae fantasy, but gave its unique twist on them. And it was one of these fantasies that the characters didn't take themselves super seriously, so it was more on the comedic side, which was rather refreshing to read in a relatively high-stakes fantasy book. Therefore, maybe I could have the Thief of Spring for this category, or would Grave Situation qualify? I don't believe. I mean, I think it's a fairy tale in terms of like, I think it's again, subversion of tropes, specifically when it comes to the hero's journey or the hero story. So I believe there we have like a reluctant hero as our main character, also more on the comedic side when it comes to fantasy. But I don't think that would qualify for like fairy tales or folklore. What would actually definitely qualify is also something that I have been meaning to read for a while, simply because I am Hungarian and The Wolf and the Woodsman from Ava Reid is based on or inspired by Hungarian history and Jewish mythology. And I'm just really curious to read that because as a Hungarian person, it's not often that my mythology, culture, etc. is featured in a fantasy world building setting. So I'm really curious. And actually, from Ava Reid, I have read The Study in Drowning, which I enjoyed. It wasn't as... Let's just say I feel like I had the wrong expectations going into that book, and therefore it wasn't as enjoyable as it could have been if I had no expectations. So maybe with The Wolf and the Woodsman, the fact that I go into it only knowing that yes, it's inspired by Hungarian history, Jewish mythology, and we follow a young woman with hidden powers, that should be enough for me to know about, not to set myself up for disappointment. I think this would qualify for folklore and fairy tales, although I'm very scared as well that I'm gonna read it like super critically and be one of those people of like, you know, like maybe she incorporated or made her own take on some of the mythology, pagan mythology especially, and then I'm gonna be like, no, this is wrong, blah blah. I don't want to be that person, but maybe I'm gonna be just in the secrecy of my notes. So yeah, I think The Wolf and the Woodsman is a strong contender. Maybe another one, if we are now really talking about usual folklore or fairy tale plot points turned around and used uniquely. I also have, and this is one of my newest acquisitions, is Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. Folklore, fairy tale, I mean, I think we have a knight and we have paladins, so it's sort of like historical fiction fantasy, and it just sounds like a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed Nettle and Bone from T. Kingfisher, and like I said, especially it was dark and it didn't really have mind-blowing elements, but it used the elements all in the right ways and even turned them around in ways which I found very refreshing to read about, especially as someone who reads a lot of fantasy and I'm very familiar with like the beat, the pacing, the character archetypes, etc. So Paladin's Grace could be something new, could be something amazing. I do love a story centered around the questions of devotion, which I believe a paladin is struggling with that. Is it gonna be the Wolf and the Woodsman, or is it gonna be Paladin's Grace? This one is hard. This one is hard because I really want to keep both of them on the reading list and then just decide like how my reading mood flows. Actually, you know what? I make the rules from my own reading list. Then I will not have 10 books, but I will have 11. But I'm taking both of them for the category of a book inspired by folklore or fairy tales. This pile is getting taller and taller, but we only have one category left to go, which is a witchy book with cottagecore energy. And I feel like I have a love-hate relationship with this kind of genre, because there are stories that I really enjoy. For example, and now the name escapes me, I just know that it's a long title, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. That one I really enjoyed. But for example, I also read Rewitched, which was really like not... I feel like I didn't really remember much of the plot. It wasn't a memorable experience for me. It was kind of just like a okay read, like it passed the time, but didn't really leave an impact, so to say. But now that I'm talking about The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I actually remember that Sangu Mandana had a book coming out which would qualify for this category. Yes, because she came out with a new book. Oh, it was actually published in July. I haven't really seen it in the bookstores here in Vienna yet, but maybe I just haven't really looked. It is titled A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, which covers the witch category, covers the cottagecore category, and it's from an author that I know I enjoy reading these cozy, low stakes, but still not boring stories from. The thing is, what comes to my mind from this title is one of my favorite contemporary romance novels from Talia Hibbert, which is Act Your Age, Evie Brown, where Evie basically had to run this guy's bread and breakfast in after, I think she made him broke his leg or broke his arm, something, whatever. That was a lot of fun to read, one of my 5-star books. I reread it multiple times. Now it's been a while since I read it, so I don't recall the plot points exactly. But somehow the title, The Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, gives this kind of vibe. And also because I believe based on the cover, the main male character is also blonde, which was the same in Act Your Age, Evie Brown. So I don't know, in my mind the two books, they could be very similar in the very best sense. Yeah, I think because I don't really know, or nothing else comes to my mind when it comes to witchy books at the moment, and I don't have anything physical copy or ebook right now, for the last category I will go for A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. And I will let you know if it proves to be a cozy, low-stakes witchy story that I actually enjoy. Okay, I feel like this was a little bit chaotic for putting together my TBR, but then in the end I ended up with, if I can move it, this pile of books, which I think describes my current reading taste and reading mood very well. And I am excited to get to all of these books, to either of these books, to any of these books. Will I read all of them? Let's see. At one point in the upcoming years, I'm sure I will get to all of them. Right now, for the autumn, these are my goals, and I'm very sure that I could get to a good chunk of them. Let me know, as a fellow mood reader or chaotic reader, what is on your autumn TBR, what do you feel like reading, if you do yourself these little prompt exercises just to make sure that your autumn TBR really features themes, categories, genres, subgenres that you feel like reading the most at the moment. And I will see you in my next video. Until then, take care. Bye!